propose revisions that always seem to involve less respect for the rights of free nations and less freedom for the individual. These matters would be difficult under any circumstances. They are further complicated by a trend in Western countries away from global engagement and democratic confidence. Parts of Europe have developed an identity crisis. We have seen insolvency, economic stagnation, youth unemployment, anger about immigration, resurgent ethno-nationalism, and deep questions about the meaning and durability of the European Union. America is not immune from these trends. In recent decades, public confidence in our institutions has declined. Our governing class has often been paralyzed. The American dream of upward mobility seems out of reach for some who feel left behind in a changing economy. Bigotry seems emboldened. Politics seems more vulnerable to conspiracy theories and outright fabrication.
You both were members of Skull and Bones, a secret society at Yale. What does that tell us?
Not much, because it's a secret.
Is there a secret handshake? Is there a secret code?
I wish there were something secret I could manifest.
322, a secret number?
There are all kinds of secrets.
Now, as you may know, my running mate, Tim, is Catholic and went to Jesuit schools. And one of the things he and I have talked about is this idea from the Jesuits of the Magus, the more, the better.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Codeword Barbelon. We're reading today on Sunday, March 25th, 2018, and I am joined here with Jörg Glissman from Belgium, and we are on Chapter 26, Revolution and Wars, the Bane of All Nations. Welcome, Jörg.
Thank you, Brett, and we're going to start right away with a quote from Jesuit Cardinal Manning, or Jesuit-trained Cardinal Manning at least, who said, "We are prepared to deluge Europe in blood in order to recover the Pope's temporal power." Yeah, you know, without the shedding of blood, no one can be saved, so they are saving the Pope by shedding millions of liters of blood of innocent people in Europe in the coming centuries. That's what we're going to read about today in Codeword Barbelon, starting on page 269 on the top. All in all, the Jesuits had been expelled, reinstated, outlawed, redissolved, and restored no less than 70 times in the various countries of Europe. Yet each time they returned from exile again and again in triumph. And history faithfully records, quote, "the harvest of plots, tumults, seditions, revolutions, torturings, poisonings, assassinations, regicides, and massacres," unquote, that flowed from their intrigues unabated. What was it that was so iniquitous about the Society of Jesus? Yeah, that's an interesting question. The bull or brief that Pope Clement XIV wrote in 1773 confirmed the malevolence, listing a, quote, "long and heinous catalogus of charges," unquote, against them as having, quote, "instigating various insurrections and rebellions, undermining corporations of every sort in Europe, in Asia, and in America," unquote. Antichrist Pope Clement the Bull had further accused them of tumults, disturbances, violence, and of disturbing the peace of the Church and the nations. Thus, it was not without good justification that they were labeled the bane of all nations. Wrote Wiley, quote, "Had this accusation proceeded from a Protestant pen, it might have been regarded as not free from exaggeration. But coming from the papal chair, it must be accepted as the sober truth," unquote. That the bull fully justified itself was shown from the formidable list of charges against the Jesuits. Says the Encyclopedia Americana that they, quote, "have been expelled over and over again from almost every Catholic country in Europe, always, however, coming back again to renew their work when the storm had subsided," unquote. is proof that there is something iniquitous in this very nature of the organization. But despite the numerous attempts at suppression, their intrigues continued unabated, leading the editor of Journal des Débats to write, quote, "The name Jesuit is on everyone's lips, but only with a curse to follow. It echoes through the columns of every newspaper in the land, always with fear and sorrow, and it has been carried all throughout France on the wings of terror." Unquote.
I got a comment.
Yeah, please.
I noticed here we have a quote from the 1904 Encyclopedia Americana. And I have this encyclopedia, and I've been reading this, and I've been going, man, I got to send this to Yerk because we got to talk about this. You know, because this definition of Jesuit here in this encyclopedia is so far off in some places. I mean, it states all kinds of things that are not correct. But then they turn around and say, oh, well, quote, "have expelled over and over again in every Catholic country in Europe, always, however, coming back again to renew their work when the storm had subsided." So, yeah, that's a really good quote he pulled out of there. And I'm just wondering now, is he going to bring it up in the future? He might. But anyway, that's my comment.
Okay. Thank you for your comment, Brett.
You're welcome.
The allusion here is to the terror of the French Revolution. The allusion, not illusion. Huh? Understand me correctly. Huh? That's what I said already before we started reading this at the end of last broadcast, that is one of the bloody revolutions that they are part of. You know, while we're at it, French Revolution, I just wanted to say you had a conversation with Michael yesterday on the phone, right?
Yes, I did.
During our Bible study, he sent me a little link about what was my stance on the Magna Carta. Let me just see that I get this. Here. That was a day. That was a little bit before. Yeah, he said, "I wish you an interesting Sabbath." And if I know this here and about the influence of canon law on Magna Carta. So I had a little look at it and I said, yeah, that's long ago. And I said, I'm not a fan of the Magna Carta, as you probably can think of. So he didn't respond to that, but that's not the point. The point is that a lot of people who are listening to this video right now would not understand why I am not a friend of the Magna Carta.
Sure.
And there are also a lot of people who would not understand why I am not a friend of the Human Rights Declaration that took place at the end of the French Revolution. But that's for the same reason. The Magna Carta and the Declaration of Human Rights at the end of the French Revolution have no base in the Bible.
Right.
And that's the same, I'm sorry to say, with the Constitution of the United States of America. It has no reliance anywhere on the Bible. Whether in the Constitution nor in the Declaration of Independence, nothing has to do with the Bible.
No.
And on the surface, all that seems right, you know. But that's the same with human rights. People read these human rights and say, well, that's wonderful, that's wonderful. But you have to consider that these human rights are given to you by the powers that rule you.
Yep.
And when the powers that rule you give you rights, they can also take away those rights. Now, just one little question, and then we go on reading in Codeword Barbelon, because I don't want to go too far away from the subject. But the point is, name me one right God ever gave to men.
Oh, one right?
Yeah.
Well, there's only laws.
Exactly. He never gave us rights.
No.
That's right, Brett. He never gave us right. He gave us laws, he gave us ordinances, he gave us rules to obey.
Yep.
And the way to obey the rules, but he never gave us rights.
No.
Never ever.
No. Not
Because
once.
by obeying the law, everybody is imputed rights anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Like when Jesus said, the second commandment is like the first, and that is the second then, love your neighbor as yourself.
Yes.
That gives my neighbor the rights of not being physically harmed, for example.
Yes.
But that's because I have to follow the law of God.
That's right.
That doesn't give him an explicit right. That doesn't give me an explicit right. But all this world does is turn all the law of God around and giving quote-unquote rights to men that then they can retract whenever they feel like it again. And that's the dangerous thing about this.
Mm-hmm.
And we always have to keep that in the back of our heads while we are reading about these revolutions, and then later on, when we read, the people are given rights.
Mm-hmm.
The people in the United States were given rights with the Constitution, and they were given rights because they wanted to break away from England, but they didn't need that rights because they were living under the law of God and they were respecting each other, and that is right enough. And that is something that people have to understand. But a lot of people don't get it.
No.
And that's why they say, oh, but Jörg, but the Magna Carta is a wonderful thing, and the Declaration of the Human Rights is a wonderful thing. Yeah, is it? Think about it in the right terms, and I don't think that you will say that again. No.
Right.
But okay, let's continue. European wars and their causes between 1776 and 1945. Well, this can be just a little part of this chapter because that is an encyclopedia of itself.
Yeah, no doubt.
Okay, let's see what P.D. Stewart has to say about this. Joseph II of Austria said of the Jesuits, writing to Choiseul, the prime minister of Louis XV, that is the French king, quote, I know these men as well as anyone can do. All the schemes they have carried on and the pains they have taken to spread darkness over the earth, as well as their efforts to rule and embroil Europe in wars from Cape Finisterre to Spitzbergen. In China, they were mandarins, in France, academicians, courtiers and confessors, in Spain and Portugal, grandees, and in Paraguay, kings. Had not my grand-uncle Joseph I become emperor, we had in all probability seen in Germany, too, a Jesuit Malariga, or an Alvieros, unquote. Most likely a reference to the Jesuit Alvaro Semido was here made, who was imprisoned and later banished by the Chinese court in 1616, along with other worthless Jesuit priests for their subversive activities. And end of the footnote, and I really think we have to underline this wonderful word that he uses here, worthless Jesuit priests.
Well, that's
in
right.
In the book of Revelation, we read the following words, quote, and in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints, and of all that were slain upon the earth. Now, who is her? The historian W.E.H. Leakey, in his History of the Rise of Rationalism in Europe wrote, quote, the Church of Rome has shed more innocent blood than any other institution that ever existed. It is impossible to form a complete conception of the multitudes of her victims, unquote. And Catholic General Jesuit-trained son of George Washington, Lafayette, declared, quote, they, meaning the Jesuits, are the most crafty, dangerous enemies to civil and religious liberty. They have instigated most of the wars of Europe, unquote. This grave charge is also found in Leo H. Lehman's work Behind the Dictators that you are uploading for the moment on your channel, Brad.
That's right.
Yeah, but when they listen to this, that's already long done. So.
Oh yeah. For sure.
But you can find the reading of me of Leo H. Lehman's work Behind the Dictators on Brett's channel and on my channel. So check that out. We have respective playlists for that. And in the book 14 years a Jesuit by Count von Hunsbruck, a German noble and ex-Jesuit. Formidable charges form formidable sources. You know, Brett, I'm almost tempted to open my Firefox browser and read to you what I started reading at the last video. At the last video that I did of the secret history of the Jesuits.
Oh, that's right. I thought I remember something about this. I think you may have mentioned this.
Yeah, you remember that?
Very vaguely. Not as
just,
well as you do, obviously. Yeah.
Okay. Let's just see if I can get this open here. Secret history. I just need the secret history of the Jesuits by Edmund Paris. Go to the very last page. And there I have a link. There I have a link, and that link then I need to put into my browser here. Open the browser, paste and go. That is from a forum that is called...
Interesting.
Sorry, it didn't take this here. So... this is from a forum called Let's Roll Community Forums. Quotations on the Jesuit Order. So I'm almost tempted to do a reading of that. What do you think about that, Brett?
Please go for it.
Yeah, I sent you the link here on Skype because he started with these quotations. I think that we can, before we go into European wars and their causes, we can just learn a little bit about what other people have to say about the Jesuit Order. Quotations. My history of the Jesuits, it's not eloquently written, but it is supported by unquestionable authorities, and is very particular and very horrible. The Jesuits' order restoration in 1814 by Pope Pius VII is indeed a step toward darkness, is indeed a step toward cruelty, despotism, and death. I do not like the appearance of the Jesuits. If ever there was a body of men who merited eternal damnation on earth and in hell, it is this Society of Loyola. John Adams, 2nd President of the United States of America. It's my opinion that if the liberties of this country, the United States of America, are destroyed, it will be by the subtlety of the Roman Catholic Jesuit priests, for they are the most crafty, dangerous enemies to civil and religious liberty. They have instigated most of the wars of Europe. Marquis de Lafayette, French statesman and general. He served in the American Continental Army under the command of General George Washington during the American Revolutionary War. That's why I just called him the son of George Washington. He was not, of course, not his. He was not, of course, his physical son, but he was a quote-unquote pupil of George Washington.
Gotcha.
And Lafayette named his child after George Washington.
I see.
So they were very closely bound together. And because I read that quote from Lafayette, I thought, let's have a look at this quote here.
Sure.
Well, when you make the video, Brett, you can easily put the site on there and people can read along. Because this is a long page of quotes. But whenever you say, let's go back to the reading, we can go. But for the rest, I will continue reading a few quotes on the Jesuit order here. The American Civil War between 1861 and 1865 would never have been possible without the sinister influence of the Jesuits. Abraham Lincoln, President of the United States. The public is practically unaware of the overwhelming responsibility carried by the Vatican and its Jesuits in the starting of the two world wars, a situation which may be explained in part by the gigantic finances at the disposition of the Vatican and its Jesuits, giving them power in so many spheres, especially since the last conflict. Unquote. From Edmund Paris, author of the book The Secret History of the Jesuits, among other books. From Samuel Morse, the inventor of the telegraph, we read, quote, "The Jesuits are a secret society, a sort of Masonic order with super-added features of revolting odiousness and 1,000 times more dangerous." From R.W. Thompson, ex-Navy Secretary and author of the book The Footsteps of the Jesuits, we read, "The Jesuits are the deadly enemies of civil and religious liberty." From Napoleon I, we read, and this is not from Napoleon himself, but we read this already in the book Codeword Barbelon, so you can look our broadcast there up and see that this is not from him himself, but that is more in his memories and in his memoirs written by someone else. "The Jesuits are a military organization, not a religious order. Their chief is a general of an army, not the mere father abbot of a monastery. And the aim of this organization is power. Power in its most despotic exercise, absolute power, universal power, power to control the world by the volition of a single man, the Black Pope, i.e., the superior general of the Jesuits. Jesuitism is the most absolute of despotism, and at the same time, the greatest and most enormous of abuses." Unquote. From Tapasosi, we read something that I told you already numerous times before, that the Roman Inquisition had been administered since 1542 by the Jesuits. And by G.E.C. Shepherd, a Canadian historian, we read, "Between 1555 and 1931, the Society of Jesus was expelled from at least 83 countries, city-states, and cities for engaging in political intrigue and subversion plots against the welfare of the state, according to the records of a Jesuit priest of repute, Thomas J. Campbell. Practically every instance of expulsion was for political intrigue, political infiltration, political subversion, and inciting to political insurrection." Unquote. From the same author, "It is impossible to read Elizabethan history," means the story surrounding Queen Elizabeth I of England, who reigned between 1558 and 1603, and when she was dead, kept the reins over to James I, who gave us the King James Bible, "except in the context of an army of Jesuits, masters of deceit, treachery, treason, infiltration, subversion, assassination, insurrection, civil war, and coercion, plotting for the good of the papacy and the defeat of all the Pope's foes anywhere in the world." From Theodor Griesinger, the guy that I'm reading the book in German at the moment, as you know, because I mentioned him numerous times during the reading of Codeword Barbelon, we read, "The whole frightful responsibility for this terrible 30 Years' War between 1618 and 1648 must rest upon the Holy Roman Emperor Ferdinand II and his teachers, rulers, and bosom friends, the sons of Loyola." Unquote. From James Parton, who is an American historian, we read, quote, "If you trace up Masonry through all its orders, till you come to the grand tip-top head of Mason of the world, you will discover that the dread individual and the chief of the Society of Jesus are one and the same person." That is written in James Parton, his work, and also we know that this is from Isis Unveiled from Helena Blavatsky, where James Parton cites from in his work. From Luigi Descantes, we read, and he was an official censor of the Inquisition, "All these things caused the Father General of the Jesuits to be feared by the Pope and sovereigns. A sovereign who is not their friend, the Jesuits' friend that will mean, will sooner or later experience their vengeance." From Robert J. Breckinridge, an author, we read, "The Society of Jesus is the enemy of man." I don't think that there are shorter words to put it more eloquently. The Society of Jesus is the enemy of man, full stop. No need to say any more. The whole human race should unite for its overthrow, for there is no alternative between its total extirpation and the absolute corruption and degradation of mankind.
Wow. Good one.
Yeah.
I like that.
But I wouldn't speak of the whole human race. I would speak of mankind.
Yeah.
Because that's more biblical.
It is. Absolutely right.
From Fyodor Dostoevsky, a famous Russian novelist, we read, Quote, "The Jesuits are simply the Romish army for the earthly sovereignty of the world in the future, with the Pontiff of Rome for emperor. That's their ideal. It is simple lust of power or filthy earthly gain of domination. Something like a universal serfdom with them as masters. That's all they stand for. They don't even believe in God, perhaps."
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
From Boyd Barrett, who is a quote-unquote ex-Jesuit, we read, "The Jesuit order at last reached the pinnacle of its power and prestige in the early 18th century, meaning the early 1700s. It had become more influential and more wealthy than any other organization in the world. It held a position in world affairs that no oath-bound group of men has ever held before or since. Nearly all the kings and sovereigns of Europe had only Jesuits as directors of their consciences, meaning as their confessionals, yeah? Confessor priests, so that the whole of Europe appeared to be governed by Jesuits only." From M.F. Cusack, an ex-nun who wrote the book The Black Pope, by the way, a book that I have on my computer sitting for years and I'm anxious to read, we read, "In Roman Catholic circles it is well known that the Black Pope is the term used for the Superior General of the Jesuits. As the Pope is always robed in white and the Jesuit Superior General in black, the contrast is obvious. But those Romanists do not greatly love the Jesuits, and their number is not limited, use the term as indicating that the Black Pope rules the White Pope, even while the former, meaning the Black Pope, is obligated to make at least a show of submission to the latter." From the same author we read, "The Jesuits are the only religious order in the Church of Rome which has lain under the ban of the White Pope, or which has been expelled from any country because of its interference in politics. Hence, we may expect to find that to obtain political power forms a main feature in the plans of the Society of Jesus." Unquote. Alas, I knew they would poison me, but I did not expect to die in so slow and cruel a manner. Antichrist Pope Clement XIV, who had quote-unquote forever abolished the Jesuit order in 1773 with his brief or bull of Dominus Dominic ac Redemptor. Jeremiah J. Crowley, an Irish ex-priest from the Roman Catholic Church and author of the book Romanism, Menace to the Nation, said, quote, "The Jesuit Superior General is at the head of this black and mute militia, which thinks, wills, acts, obeys as the passive instrument of his designs. Their whole life must have but one aim, the advancement of the Jesuit order to which they are attached." From Friedrich von Hardenberg, a German philosopher, we read, "Never before in the course of the world's history had such a society appeared. The old Roman Senate itself did not lay schemes of world domination with greater certainty of success." From Bill Hughes, author of The Secret Terrorists and the Enemy Unmasked, and he will be quoted numerous more times in this reading, we read, "Jesuit Adam Weishaupt established the modern version of the Illuminati specifically to be a front organization behind which the Jesuits could hide. After being formally abolished by Pope Clement XIV in 1773, the Jesuits used the Illuminati and other organizations to carry out their operations. Thus, the front organizations would be blamed for the trouble caused by the Jesuits." Unquote. From Emmanuel M. Josephson, an American physician and historian, we read, "Jesuit-trained Illuminist Adam Weishaupt and his fellow Jesuits cut off the income from the Vatican by launching and leading the French Revolution. by directing Napoleon's conquest of Catholic Europe, and by eventually having Napoleon throw Pope Pius VII in jail at Avignon until he agreed, as the price for his release, to re-establish the Jesuit order. This Jesuit war on the Vatican was terminated by the Congress of Vienna and by the secret 1822 Treaty of Verona. Unquote. We have 3 treaties, Brett, that are very, very worthy of investigating and researching and reading to our public, and that are the secret Treaty of Vienna, of Chieri, and of Verona, all 3, and they all happened between 1815 and 1825. So very interesting to do research in that regard. I can tell.
That's for sure.
Yeah. So, again from Bill Hughes, why would the Jesuits use their implacable enemy, the Jews, to further their designs for world dominion? The Jesuits never do anything out in the open where they can be exposed. If they are recognized as the culprits, they will be blamed and suffer the consequences. But if they can use someone else as the cause of the world's problems, especially an enemy they can destroy in the process, then they have simultaneously accomplished 2 of their objectives. The Jewish people are the perfect scapegoat. Since the Rothschilds are Jesuit agents operating under a Jewish cover, using them in forming the Illuminati back in 1776, effectively throws the onus of this conspiracy on the Jews. The Rothschilds are certainly not the only Jesuit agents that operate under a Jewish front. History books will tell us that the French Revolution first began in 1787 or 1789, depending on which book you read. However, it was actually planned by Jesuit Dr. Adam Weishaupt and the House of Rothschild almost 20 years before the revolution took place. We can read with William Sutton, author of the New Age Movement and the Illuminati, 606 books. From Hector Macpherson, author of the book The Jesuits in History, we read, "They," meaning of course the Jesuits, "have so constantly mixed themselves up in court and state intrigues that they must, in justice, be reproached with striving after world dominion. They cost kings their lives, not on the scaffold, but by assassination. And equally hurtful as the Society of Illuminati, they were the foremost among the crowd, at all events, who applauded the murder scenes in Paris during the French Revolution." This is a quote from Hector Macpherson. From Bill Hughes again, the Jesuit Adam Weishaupt and the Rothschilds managed to cast the blame for the French Revolution on their front organization, the Illuminati. Well, this was an interesting excursion, but if I keep reading, this video goes on for 2 hours, and we wanted to read a little bit on the Codeword Barbelon. But this just gives you an interesting link that Brett will, of course, put in the description box of this video, so that you can read all these quotations from yourself. And this has nothing to do with conspiracy theory, because these are well-known, renowned authors through the last 4 centuries where you can read this stuff from. They don't suck this just outright off their thumb. These are people who really made their investigations themselves, their own research, you know?
Right.
So I think I'm going to continue then reading in this book, okay?
Good. Yes.
On the top of page 271 we were. "Even Jesuit historians have admitted that the members of the Society of Jesus have instigated numerous plots against many of the powers of Europe. Edmond Paris, in his books The Secret History of the Jesuits and the Vatican Against Europe, says that most of the wars of the 20th century are also be attributed to the Jesuits and their agent." That is a quote that we just read. Huh? The Encyclopedia Britannica confirms this. Quote, "They were also responsible by their theoretical teachings in theological schools for not a few assassinations of the enemies of the cause. What professors like Suarez taught in the calm atmosphere of the lecture hall, what writers like Mariana upheld and praised, practical men took as justification for deeds of blood. Their perpetual meddling in politics, their perpetual plotting against England in the reign of Elizabeth, their share in the 30 Years' War, etc., etc., etc. And according to Paris and the respected Niccolini, G.P. Niccolini, wonderful work that he did, they were behind the wars on the Slavic world. The Slovakians who were slaughtered by the millions under Stalin and other Jesuit-trained leaders. They used communism to revenge the Slav nation and the Serbs. In late 1913, Prince Schönberg had an audience with Pope Pius X, who told Schönberg, quote, "It would certainly have been better if Austria-Hungary had punished the Serbians for all the wrongs they had done." Unquote. This is a quote I also read in The Secret History of the Jesuits. I remember that from reading that book. In The Secret History of the Jesuits, Edmond Paris points out that, contrary to Catholic Church propaganda, Pope Pius X instigated hostilities between Austria-Hungary and Serbia. Thus, it seems fair to say that the Church of Rome, with its long history of bloodshed and Jesuit-instigated wars and insurrections, more than any other organization, best answers to the figure described in Revelation 18, verses 23 through 24, quote, "In her was found the blood of all that were slain upon the earth," unquote. Only those who have not read the Jesuit oath would find any of this hard to believe. For as we read much earlier, the oath of the Jesuits and the instructions given in their induction enjoin upon them to murder, incite wars, revolutions, and civil unrest. I cite again, briefly, that part of the Jesuit instruction, for it cannot be too often repeated. Quote, "You have been taught to insidiously plant the seeds of jealousy and hatred between states that were in peace, and incite them to deeds of blood, involving them in war with each other, and to create revolutions and civil wars in communities, provinces, and countries that were independent and that were prosperous, cultivating the arts and the sciences and enjoying the blessings of peace. To take sides with the combatants and to act secretly in concert with your brother Jesuit, only that the Church might be the gainer in the end, and the conditions fixed in the treaties for peace. The ends justified the means." We come to the secret movers of the French Revolution. The awful result of the attempted suppression of the Jesuits in 1773 was that the period saw the most chaotic and fearful scenes of revolution, deposed kings, and desecrated altars. The Jesuit-trained Voltaire died in the year following the founding of the Illuminati, and virtually all his disciples, as if with one voice, joined forces with Jacobism. Almost immediately thereafter, the French Revolution burst upon mankind. The scenes of this awful event the Jesuits proudly pointed to as the signal of the divine anger at the disbanding of their order. But in fact, they had orchestrated the strife through an active member of their society, the quote-unquote ex-Jesuit Adam Weishaupt. The causes of the French Revolution can never be understood in the pages of official history. It is only by examining the machinations of the secret societies under the name of Illuminism can we explain that extraordinary episode, the explosion that broke out in 1789. This revolution was fomented under the pretext of an artificially created shortage of grain in France. The result was that France was brought into schism and anarchy. You know, Brett, as the author says here,
Mm-hmm.
that the revolution was fomented under the pretext of an artificially created shortage of grain,
Yes.
reminds me that in 1776, the Declaration of Independence was fomented under the pretext of an artificially wrong textus of no taxation without representation.
Mm-hmm.
That came by, hold your horses, Jesuit-trained Daniel Carroll. Charles Carroll. He was the one who fomented this sentence, no taxation without representation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Right.
So you see, under false pretenses, they start up everything.
Yep.
You know, you had this, one of the key events that got the people to want to have that revolution, that revolutionary war, was the Boston Tea Party, you know?
Right.
When in Boston, all the tea was put aside. And those were not Indians, but those were Freemasons dressed as Indians.
That's right. That's right.
And so you see the pattern, right?
Mm-hmm.
You see the pattern they used in the United States in 1776. They used the same pattern, a different one, shortage of grain, in France to get their revolution over here, right?
Right.
And isn't it an interesting fact that the United States of America declared themselves independent and became a nation state in 1789? I mean, the Declaration of Independence was 1776, but then followed the war and everything else. The United States became a nation in 1789. Isn't that a coincidence between
really
quotation marks that same 1789 was starting the French Revolution?
Well, I know that. Isn't it 1789 that Jesuit Georgetown University was founded?
Yeah, also. Yeah, that was the date that the United States was founded. John Carroll founded the Boys' School of Georgetown, which was first a boys' school, a boarding school for boys. Right. And from that later came Georgetown University as it stands today. Yeah.
Yes.
That was 1789. Yeah. Absolutely. You're correct there.
Yeah, thought so.
So continue reading here, but it's just, you know, that you have to make the point when nobody is very good at years and keeping all the years, but you know, 1789 for an American is a date they know, but isn't it a quote-unquote coincidence that the same year started the French Revolution over here?
Right. Huh? Yeah. Right. And, coincidence. Yeah.
And didn't the French support the War of Independence of the colonies? So isn't that a little payback?
Yeah.
For the French mingling in the affairs of America? Huh? That the Jacobins, under the direction of Weishaupt's agent Giuseppe Balsamo, alias Cagliostro, a Jew, a Freemason, a magician, and hermetic, doctor of Kabbalistic art, so I'd say a devil in disguise, egged on by the Jesuit educated Voltaire. On other acolytes were the instigators and directors of the French Revolution has never been disputed by any credible historian.
Oh, the footnote here for Voltaire, number 14.
Yeah, Voltaire was a pupil of the Jesuits at their celebrated College of Louis le Grand in Paris, formerly known as the Collège de Clermont, a well-known Masonic center of the 16th century. And that is where Ignatius Loyola studied also. Yeah, I know.
Interesting.
Voltaire was a Jesuit. You have to be sure of that because he does some quotes, as we also read, against the Jesuits, but he's a Jesuit himself. You know?
So Adam Weishaupt had an agent here, Giuseppe Balsamo.
Giuseppe Balsamo, alias Cagliostro. Yeah.
Ah, Cagliostro. I thought I remember hearing this name before. So yeah, they're really into some dark stuff, man.
Yeah, absolutely. He was a Jew, a Freemason, magician, and hermetic doctor of Kabbalistic art. He was just a devil. When you combine all that, being a Jew, a Freemason, magician, and a hermetic doctor of Kabbalistic art, that's...
Now I can see why whenever Voltaire pops up, it's like, what's this? wow, this is ugly. Yeah, the French Revolution is, this is something so vital to study in history. It really is. This is a fantastic chapter right here.
Absolutely. Now, it puts some connections where some people always in their research up to now have tasted in the darkness and not seen the solution.
Yeah, that's correct. Yep. Very good.
Connecting the dots, huh?
Yeah, very much. Let's see.
We need only to read Weishaupt's writing. They predicted well in advance everything that happened in France, Portugal, and Spain, the very countries that had expelled the Jesuits. Well before the events between 1773 and 1775, a Jesuit-trained scholar, Caritat de Condorcet, a close friend of Voltaire, wrote his ideas, all of which, more or less, forecasted the coming revolution. As is so often the case with the Jesuits, when they are not able to act openly, they act vicariously.
Oh, yeah, the vicar, yeah. Didn't know about that.
In place of.
Yeah.
They act in place of.
That's right.
The Church of Rome has said that it was, quote, prepared to deluge Europe in blood in order to recover the Pope's temporal power, unquote. In his lectures on the French Revolution from 1889, Lord Dalbach-Acton, an honest Catholic, I have problems reading this sentence, an honest Catholic, how does that ever exist? That is an oxymoron in itself.
Yeah, it is.
So, in 1889, Lord Dalbach-Acton, observed, quote, the appalling thing in the French Revolution is not the tumult, but the design. Through all the fire and smoke, we perceive the evidence of calculating organization. The managers remain studiously concealed and masked, but there's no doubt about their presence from the first. They had been active in the riots of Paris, and they were again active in the provincial rising. They entered into compacts and combinations, unquote. It was the Catholic Illuminati, or the Jesuits revived, who engineered that revolt. And though little known, it is well established that Napoleon Bonaparte too was recruited into the Illuminati to fulfill its revolutionary purposes. Yes, Napoleon Bonaparte, I can't emphasize that enough, came from Corsica, where the Jesuits flew to when they were given no other safe haven, and out of Corsica came Napoleon Bonaparte to get a punishment on France and through France's army to the whole of Europe that was not in the Jesuits' favor all the years before. Napoleon was just a payback. The period immediately following the banishment of the Jesuits saw not only the demise of the monarchs who had called for their suppression, but a hidden force was leading to the disruption of the whole civil order in Europe. Who was behind this hidden force? Well, the Catholic Encyclopedia hints that it was a hidden force, quote, overthrowing every throne that had combined against them, and that in the anguish of that trial, many were the cries of the re-establishment of the order, i.e. the Jesuits, unquote. So the hidden force was seeking the re-establishment of the Jesuit order. The Jesuits had been suppressed in 1773 by the combined efforts of the monarchs of France, Spain, and Portugal. And as stated above, the Catholic Encyclopedia admits to a hidden force overthrowing every throne that had combined against them, i.e. the Jesuits. Speaking of this period of upheaval and revolution, Prince de Ligne wrote to Madame de Choisy, quote, if the Jesuits had not been expelled, we would not be seeing this accursed spirit of turbulence spreading like a torrent that threatens all the thrones of Europe, unquote. The drama predicted by de Ligne was later openly played out in the terrible scenes of the French Revolution, and in the raising up of their great avenger, Napoleon Bonaparte, whose Catholic advisor was the Jesuit-trained cleric Father Abbé Emmanuel Joseph Sieyès. Father Sieyès was second consul of the Napoleonic regime, and according to Robertson, Sieyès was also a French Illuminati, a disciple of Jacobinism. Sieyès had Napoleon punish Pope Pius VII by having him imprisoned for 5 years until he restored the Jesuit order by the bull Sollicitudo Omnium Ecclesiarum. Sieyès was also a leading figure behind the revolution which swept away the monarchy that had banned the Jesuit order. William T. Still tells us how this was done. Quote, "As radicals flocked into these new varieties of Illuminism, a larger meeting hall was needed. The hall of the Jacobins' convent was leased, and it was from the hall that they eventually derived their new name, the Jacobin Club. The Jacobin Club met in secret, eventually boasted of having some of the best educated and most influential men in France among its 1,300 members. The Jacobins vowed to destroy the monarchy as well as other existing institutions and sought to establish what they called a New World Order, or Universal Republic." Unquote. Historian Jean Albert Sorel wrote in his book Europa und die Revolution, or Europe and the Revolution, that the Freemason Lord Mansfield stated openly in Parliament, quote, "The money that was spent to further the French Revolution was money well spent." Unquote. It was the hidden hand of the Jesuits, through their Illuminati disciple, the so-called ex-Jesuit Adam Weishaupt, that devised, used, and funded Jacobinism to instigate the French Revolution and the carnage that followed. Nestor H. Webster states of the hidden hand of the Illuminati, quote, "By March 1789, the 266 lodges controlled by the Grand Orient were all Illuminized without knowing it, for the Freemasons in general were not told the name of the sect that brought them the mysteries, and only a very small number were really initiated into the secret. The following months, the French Revolution broke out." Unquote. The secret movers of the French Revolution, who had sworn to overturn the throne and altar, were the Jacobite Illuminati, founded by Adam Weishaupt. The French Revolution of 1789 was to be the beginning of many similar Jesuit offensives, to revenge their suppression as well as to further their long-held plans for world domination. This they conducted through illuminated Freemasonry. In a letter of August 1871, the Masonic pontiff, Albert Pike, wrote to his arch-conspirator Mazzini, quote, "We shall unleash the nihilists and the atheists, and we shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm, communism and Bolshevism, and the multitude, disillusioned with Christianity, without compass, anxious for an ideal, but without knowing where to render its adoration, will receive the pure light through the universal manifestation, which will result from the general reactionary movement." Unquote. Causing disillusionment with Christianity was the very work of the 1917 revolution in Russia, the revolution that changed the world and has been the aim of every communist movement since. In Latin America, for example, the Jesuit priests fomented Marxist revolutions under the guise of liberation theology and made havoc in those South American countries that then had the effect of flooding America with Catholic economic and political refugees. Just stopping the reading for a second. Mentioning here liberation theology. I don't know if everybody is familiar with that term, but that goes back to Cardinal Bellarmine, who was the promoter of liberation theology, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that's right.
And that was Cardinal Bellarmine, right?
I think so, yep. Because I started listening to this reading of this Ark and the Dove by Tom Fress. And I think he mentioned it in
right
there.
At that time.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And Tom different times says that it is a strange thing that Cardinal Bellarmine was not excommunicated from the Roman Catholic Church, because everything that he taught was against Roman Catholic canon law.
That's right. Yeah.
That's right. But only because they needed another leverage.
Yeah.
And they couldn't get the kings, so they had to propose a government for the people, by the people, of the people.
Yep.
And then to infiltrate that and not having it let been a government that is from the bottom up, but that is from the top down. And when it is from the top down, it is from the beginning infiltrated by the Jesuit order. And that was the idea after Cardinal Bellarmine's teaching of the liberation theology. Mm-hmm. So anybody who does not know what liberation theology is should get a little bit more into studying Cardinal Bellarmine and his liberation theology teaching, and of course the founding of the United States at that time. Yeah, absolutely. Just wanted to make this little excursion.
That's right. It really helps to clarify that.
At the head of the Sandinista revolutionaries in Nicaragua was none other than Jesuit Father Fernando Cardenal, who, Cardinal, when you read that name, just change the E by an I and you have a cardinal. Huh?
Yeah, that's
Fernando Cardenal, who we are told was, quote, a towering influence in what became known as liberation theology, which was, quote, based on the revolutionary Illuminati theories of their European counterparts, unquote. The other leading honchos in this so-called revolution of liberation sorry, I missed the line here, or what?
No.
The other leading honchos in this so-called revolution of liberation were the Jesuit Miguel de Soto Brockman and Maryknoll fathers, Jesuit Alvaro Arguello, Edgar Perales, and Camilo Torres, the guerrilla priest. In fact, the whole revolution was staged by Jesuits. And when the dust settled under the Sandinistas, the Jesuit father Fernando Cardenal became director of the Sandinista youth and then minister of education, so he must be a Jesuit, huh? Mm-hmm. And Edgar Perales was appointed minister of social health. Two other priests, Ernesto Cardenal and Miguel de Soto Brockman, became minister of culture and foreign minister respectively. Many of the country's 300 or so Catholic priests are still serving in government. How profound was Sir Winston Churchill when he said, quote, from the days of Spartacus, Adam Weishaupt's alter ego,
there we go,
Wieskopf, Karl Marx, Trotsky, Rosa Luxemburg, and Emma Goldman, this world conspiracy has been steadily growing. This conspiracy played a definite, recognizable role in the tragedy of the French Revolution. It has been the mainspring of every subversive movement during the 19th century, unquote. And James Aitken Wiley warns, quote, nor can we be sure that we have seen the last and greatest of their crimes, unquote. 9/11, perhaps? I give more details in Volume 2, which will shock anyone who dares to read the book.
Bravo. Fantastic reading there, Jörg.
Thanks.
And we have the second volume to get to here. We're halfway through this volume, are we?
Yeah, we have through this one.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, of course, will come the other one. So I see the next chapter deals with the Jesuit Congress of Vienna.
Yes.
But it doesn't deal probably with Chiri and Verona, except for maybe a little mentioning here. And I can tell you, you can very, very hardly find any documentation on the secret treaty of Verona and Chiri.
Okay.
But to give you a little idea, in these treaties, the ruling monarchs of that time agreed, together with the Jesuit order, to step down from their thrones, to give a people-ruled government the possibility to come into power. That was then, of course, infiltrated by the Jesuits, and we know today that every democracy, every republic is infiltrated. And therefore, the monarchs just took a step down. Like, you know, in Belgium, where I live today, this is a kingdom. Yeah?
Sure.
And the king of Belgium has no power but being a representative for his country, like a president.
Yep.
But he has no monarchical power as we know from the past.
Right.
So these three treaties, the Treaty of Vienna, Verona, and Chiri, manifested a conspiracy between the ruling nobles of Europe in that time and the Jesuit order to lay the scheme for the political development for the next 200, 250 years to come. And that's where we are in right now. And that's why in America, a few years after these treaties, you had the Monroe Doctrine.
Ah.
That's where it all comes together, Brett.
Okay. Great. And we're headed right for it. I think that is a really good study. It's going to take me a while to absorb this, man. It's great, though. It's starting to come together. I really like this. This last chapter was really good.
Yeah, it was. And the little excursion into the quotes of the Jesuits was just fine along with it, right?
Oh, absolutely, because we're talking about revolution and wars, the bane of all nations, order out of chaos.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's what they do. They bring chaos, and then they have their auto da fe, or whatever act of faith, the shedding of blood, in their horrible doctrine. It's just to any freedom-loving part of mankind, this has got to be the worst news. No wonder they don't teach this in the churches. No one would go.
No, they don't teach it in the churches. That's one thing, but they don't even teach it in history lessons in school, and that's another. That is the most formidable thing. You know, I have been reading. Right. I have been reading. Did the Catholic Church give us the Bible today? And
that's right.
And there also was this point about this history. The Jesuits distort history.
Yes.
And you know, the problem is that we as Bible students, we know that we have to take the Bible. We accept that prophecy in the Bible is history written in advance. And now, today, in 2018, we have the possibility to look back on history and see these prophecies being fulfilled. But we don't see these prophecies being fulfilled when A, we have a corrupt Bible, and B, we have corrupt history books. Then it's all a fable to us.
Sure is.
And that's the problem. And that's what they're living off.
Absolutely right.
And that's what we have to understand. And the more we understand this, and the more we teach this through reading books like Codeword Barbelon and other books, and the more people get awake, well, I'm already confident if one person says to me, I get it the way that you got it.
Mm-hmm.
I get it the way that Jesus meant us to get it.
Mm-hmm.
Because all this, Brett,
mm-hmm.
has only one purpose in the end. Bring us closer to our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
That's right.
Because this world is nothing. Jesus Christ is everything. And with that, I want to end.
And me too. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
because it's so prophetical that while at the Council of Trent was the first council to be managed by the Jesuit order, the Vatican Council was brought about by the same Jesuit order with the same intention. And you know the intention of the Council of Trent. The intention behind the Council of Trent was the Counter-Reformation. What was the intent of the Vatican Council II? Another Counter-Reformation, but called today, how you call it? Renewal. You see the point? Now, the change was a name, but the intentions were the same.
Yes.
See, more sophisticated today.
Yes.
You see, the Counter-Reformation was taken through the to the Council of Trent. That was the entire Counter-Reformation was performed by the Council of Trent, decrees. Then through that time until today, Vatican Council II came about with the idea of renewal. That means another step forward. And the final, I will say, this is the final stage of a Counter-Reformation.
What do you think happened to Kennedy? You see, Kennedy said, no pope's going to tell me what to do in Houston in 1960. Kennedy said, you know, Cardinal Spellman, you're not invited to the White House anymore. You're not going to be coming here and saying Mass. And you're not going to be involved in the CIA Daily Brief either, Spellman. And further, Cardinal Spellman, I'm going to end this Vietnam War because I know it's your war, it's Spelly's war, and so I'm going to end it by 1965. Kennedy also said, you know, I'm going to break the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the wind because, you know, the CIA is just part of the continuing SS controlled by the Pope. Kennedy also said, you know what, I'm going to invade Cuba on December 1st, 1963, and I'm going to take Cuba back from Fidel Castro, and I'm going to give it back to the Cuban people. And Allen Dulles said, no, you're not, nigga. So Kennedy, on orders of Pope Pius VI and carried out by the Black Pope's Jesuit order in the Knights of Malta, was slaughtered at 12:30 in the afternoon on orders of the Black Pope, overseen by Cardinal Spellman. And nobody gets tried, nobody gets to jail, and they kill a little patsy named Lee Harvey Oswald, who actually liked Kennedy and was in the CIA. They killed the patsy, blamed it on him, and everything went hunky-dory. Because, you see, the Pope controls the press here. The Pope controls Fox News here.
To begin with, we have Cardinal Spellman, which is infamous. Who is infamous? But Cardinal Spellman was advised by and overseen by Edmund Walsh. And we cannot overestimate the influence and power of this singular American Jesuit at Georgetown University in Washington. Jesuit Edmund Walsh was at the Treaty of Versailles, making sure the Germans were slam-dunked, and so enraging them, putting the whole war guilt on them, that it guaranteed war in 20 years. Walsh was there. The other thing is, Edmund Walsh was also in Moscow from 1922 to 24, who was the former negotiator between the Vatican and the Bolsheviks. I covered this extensively in my book. Walsh was there for approximately 2 years. And there, in 1922, he appointed Joseph Stalin to be Secretary of the Communist Party, which he remained so until his death in 1953, or his poisoning, I should say. So Walsh was intricately involved in the Bolshevik Revolution, intricately involved in the Treaty of Versailles, and intricately involved with FDR, because as soon as FDR was, quote-unquote, elected president, one of the first things was recognize the USSR, and he did it in the White House, and sitting right next to him was Jesuit Edmund Walsh. So Edmund Walsh is a key player in this, and he is a personal friend of Robert Graham and also Robert Le Beer. Robert Le Beer, this Jesuit Robert Le Beer, was a personal confessor of Pius XII of Bitchute.
This is the order of induction in the Jesuit system. First, those studying to enter the order, the novices. Then the scholastics, the great teachers, the temporal ruling over the houses and the schools, and the coadjutors, finally, the agents. that carry out the responsibility of aiding in the world projects. Then, and only then, this mass of Jesuits can be initiated into the actual order of the Jesuits, the profess of the three vows and the profess of the four vows. Finally, after a lifetime of total commitment to this monstrous system, they could be initiated, very few have ever made it, into the mysteries of the Jesuit order. What are those mysteries? I think we're going to find out tonight, folks. The ceremony of induction of the Jesuit is in the Library of Congress in the card is 66-43354. It's an unbelievable admission to the world of what goes on in the initiation of a Jesuit into the profess. The Jesuit order, my son, you have been taught to act as dissembler among the Roman Catholics, to be a Roman Catholic, and to be a spy even among your own brethren, to believe no man, to trust no man, among the Reformers to be a Reformer, among the Huguenots to be a Huguenot, among the Calvinists to be a Calvinist, among the Protestants generally, be a Protestant. And obtaining their confidence to seek to speak from their pulpits, and to denounce with all vehemence in your nature our holy religion and the Pope, and even to descend so low as to become a Jew among the Jews, that you might be enabled to gather together all information for the benefit of your order as a faithful soldier of the Pope. You have been taught to insidiously plant the seeds of jealousy and hatred between states that were at peace, and incite them to deeds of blood, involving them in war with each other, and to create revolutions and civil wars in communities, provinces, and countries that were independent and prosperous, cultivating the arts and the sciences, enjoying the blessing of peace. To take sides with the combatants and to act secretly in concert with your brother Jesuit, who might be engaged on the other side, but openly opposed to that with which you might be connected. Only that the church might be the gainer in the end, and the condition fixed in the treaties for peace, and that the end justifies the means. You have been taught your duties as a spy to gather all statistics, facts, and information in your power from every source. To ingratiate yourself into the confidence of the family circle of the Protestants and heretics of every class and character, as well as that of the merchant, the banker, the lawyer, among the schools and universities, in parliaments and legislatures, and in the judiciaries and councils of state, and to be all things to all men for the Pope's sake, whose servants we are unto death. You have received all your instructions heretofore as a novice, a neophyte, and have served as a coadjutor, confessor, and priest, but you have not yet been invested with all that is necessary to command in the army of Loyola in the service of the Pope. You must serve the proper time as the instrument and executioner, as directed by your superiors, for none can command here who has not consecrated his labor with the blood of the heretic. For without the shedding of blood no man can be saved. Therefore, to fit yourself for your work and make your own salvation sure, you will, in addition to your former oath of obedience to your order and allegiance to the Pope, repeat after me. I promise and declare that I will, when opportunity presents, make and wage relentless war, secretly or openly, against all heretics, Protestants, liberals, as I am directed to do, to extirpate and exterminate them from the face of the whole earth, and that I will spare neither age, sex, condition, and that I will hang, burn, waste, boil, flay, strangle, bury alive these infamous heretics, rip up the stomachs and wombs of their women, and crush their infants' heads against the walls, in order to annihilate forever their execrable race. That when the same cannot be done openly, I will secretly use the poisoned cup, the strangulating cord, the steel of the poniard, or the leaden bullet, regardless of honor, rank, dignity, or authority of the person or persons, whatever they may be their condition in life, either public or private, as I, at any time, may be directed so to do by any agent of the Pope or superior of the Brotherhood of the Holy Faith, the Society of Jesus. Could they carry out these kinds of monstrous oaths? They can, because of the secret of the exercises. In Boehmer's book on the Jesuits, we read, we imbue into him spiritual forces which he would find very difficult to eliminate later. These forces can come up again to the surface, sometimes after years of not even mentioning them, and become so imperative that the will finds itself unable to oppose any obstacle and has to follow the irresistible impulse. Folks, you know what this is? It's possession. An army of possessed men dedicated to the destruction of all governments and religion in this world. We are told in the fiery Jesuits that at that time, 1667, secular persons of both sexes joined to the company by a resignation of themselves absolutely to the conduct of the professed fathers. These usually are gentlemen and merchants who enmix themselves in the court and city business and in offices, bargains and sales, or active gentlewomen and rich widows who, like a plantation of Indies, bring into the society a vault of revenue of gold and silver. Folks, even today, these societies joined to the Jesuits exist. This is the Society of the Knights of Columbus. There's a women's side to that as well. And in this publication in 1950s in Life magazine, we see that the society is alive and powerful today. Now this is the oath that the Knights of Columbus take. Again, this is from the Congressional Record. It's on file from February 15, 1913. And here it says, I'm quoting from it, not all of it, here we don't have time. I will place Catholic girls in Protestant families, that a weekly report may be made of the inner movements of the heretics, that I will provide myself with arms and ammunition, that I may be in readiness when the word is passed, or am commanded to defend the church either as an individual or with a militia of the Pope. This is in 1950s, folks, or 1913. In testimony hereof, I take this holy and blessed sacrament of the Eucharist and witness the same further with my name written with the point of this dagger dipped in my own blood and sealed in the face of this holy sacrament. I do further promise and declare that I will, when opportunity presents, make and wage relentless war secretly and openly against all heretics, Protestants, and Masons, as I am directed to do, to extirpate them from the face of the earth, and that I will spare neither age, sex, or condition, and that I will hang, burn, waste, boil, flay, strangle, bury alive these infamous heretics. Open up the stomachs and wombs of the women and crush the infants' heads against the walls in order to annihilate their execrable race. Same as the Jesuit, folks. That when the same cannot be done openly, I will secretly use the poisonous cup, the strangulation cord, the steel of the piniard, or the leaden bullet, regardless of honor, rank, dignity, or authority of the person, whatever may be their condition in life, either public or private. Should I prove false or weaken in my determination, may my brethren and fellow militia of the Pope cut off my hands and feet, cut my throat from ear to ear. May my belly be opened and sulfur burned therein with all the punishments that can be inflicted upon me on earth, and my soul shall be tormented by demons in eternal hell forever. That I will, in voting, always vote for a Knight of Columbus in preference to a Protestant, especially a Mason.
that for the first time in human history, for the first time in all of human history, almost all of mankind is politically awake. And these new and old major powers face still yet another novel reality, in some respects unprecedented. And it is that while the lethality of their power is greater than ever, their capacity to impose control over the politically awakened masses of the world is at a historical low. I once put it rather pungently, and I was flattered that the British Foreign Secretary repeated this, as follows. Namely, in earlier times, it was easier to control 1 million people, literally, it was easier to control 1 million people than physically to kill 1 million people. Today, it is infinitely easier to kill 1 million people than to control 1 million people. It is easier to kill than to control.
We're at the very beginning stages of a very brutal and bloody conflict. And I believe that we've come horribly off track in the years since the fall of the Soviet Union. And we're starting now in the 21st century, which I believe strongly is a crisis both of our church, a crisis of our faith, a crisis of the West, and a crisis of capitalism.
His son Jesus is here in our midst. His bride, the church, is honored to host an event affirming the dignity of the human person and the sacredness of all human life.
I think Russia is no longer a communist state, first of all. That's very important to realize. It hasn't yet defined itself, however, effectively as a democracy. It is still uncertain.
We're at the very beginning stages of a very brutal and bloody conflict, of which if the people in this room and the people in the church do not bind together and really form what I feel is an aspect of the church militant, if the people in this room and the people in the church do not bind together and really form what I feel is an aspect of the church militant, to really be able to not just stand with our beliefs, but to fight for our beliefs against this new barbarity that's starting, that we will literally eradicate everything that we've been bequeathed over the last 2,025 years.
You didn't mention the president by name, but it was hard not to conclude that that's who you were referring to. Is that fair?
I was certainly referring to the threats that we are now facing with this stated goals of this administration, which would upset the last 70 years of a new world order which was established after World War II. 70 years based on human rights, respect for the law, free trade, all of the things and aspects of this world order that took place after one of the most horrific, terrible wars in history, and I'm for maintaining it.
We are grateful to be citizens of one nation under God, who acclaim this evening that in God we trust. Bless our two candidates, our benefactors, and those whom the L. Smith Foundation has been honored to serve for 7 decades. Guide us safely home, both this evening and for all eternity, through Christ our Lord. Amen.